everyone, and welcome to Gorge Views. It's January 2022, and after a year-long sabbatical, we're launching a new line of videos. Now, recently, just last month, with the help of Vox Studios, we published a 5-minute video that introduces a broad range of topics and concepts centered around ecology and ecotourism. If you haven't seen the video, I'm going to provide a link above, hopefully, if I get it right when I do the post-processing of this video. And I'll certainly get it right at the end of the video and give you a link to the Niagara Green video. I hope you guys watch that. There's a lot packed into that video, so it's going to take a lot to unpack it. And that's what we're going to do over the course of this next year, is unpack all of that for you. Now, if you haven't already subscribed to the Gorge Views YouTube channel, please do so now so that you'll get alerts and notices as we publish new content. I'm certainly going to do at least one video a year. I'd like to get a lot more out in the beginning, so I'm hoping to give you a little bit more, if not a lot more, than one a week in the upcoming months. Everything we're talking about centers around transforming Niagara Falls, New York. If you need to make small changes, you simply have to change how you do things. But if you want to make big changes, you have to change the way you see things. We need to change how we see things here in Niagara Falls, especially how we see ourselves as a community and how we see our role in the world. We were once a major icon. We used to punch way above our weight class in terms of population. Now, with the loss of industry as the base of our economy, we've kind of lost our pride. But I believe that mantle of leadership is still sitting on the shelf, waiting for us to don it once again. So that's what we need to do. We need to pick that mantle up and put it on. That's the conversation I'm talking about having this year. Now, how do we do this? How should we see ourselves, and what leadership should the world look to us for? I mean, those are probably things you're asking yourself right now. And I understand why you would be. But I want you to set that aside. I want you to kind of open up your minds for a second, set the cynicism aside, and hear what I'm saying. All right, over the past decade, I know because I've been studying our economy very intensely. It's very clear we suffer because of a loss of the industries that used to fuel our economy. Dozens of factories that were selling products globally used to fuel the local economy. The local labor producing products that were sold across the globe created a huge pool of discretionary income for us here locally. We didn't need tourism. We didn't need any other outside source of revenue flowing into our economy. While the prosperity that resulted from all of this made our lives easier for a short time, I believe that was simply a detour on the road to Niagara's true destiny. And I also believe the best days are yet to come. I mean, certainly the advent of electricity was the spark that fueled that detour, and that's still here, and it will remain here, and that's a positive thing. But that's not our core strength, right? Our core strength is what's behind that hydroelectric power, the cataracts themselves, and the natural wonder that is this terrain. Yeah, we've always had a major tourist attraction in the waterfalls, but we've never really developed that. Instead, we've kind of passively accepted the tourist market that comes to us. All right, and that, there's a big difference between passively accepting tourists and deliberately developing a tourist market. Now, as a result of this, we currently have what amounts to a 3-month economy. I say 3 months because there's 3 months that we see profit. There's another 3 months that we break relatively even, and there's like 6 months of profuse bleeding. And that is killing us. Well, I asked you guys to set your cynicism aside, and I feel like I'm drawing you back down into it. All right, and we got to have our context. And the result of all of that is that we have slow to no growth, we have underemployment, we have high taxes, failing infrastructure, and all the other issues that we lament on a daily basis and fuel the cynicism that bogs us down, that we're always discussing locally. This also inhibits us, this lack of resources, this lack of profit. It inhibits us from addressing some of the leftover legacies of the industrial era, like the brownfields and the blight. In that Niagara Green video that I talked about, the question, what if, that gets asked quite a bit. Those what ifs, they deserve some serious investigation. They deserve answers. And until we develop honest, meaningful answers, we're going to continue to flounder. And, it's time to stop floundering. How do we do it? What if Niagara Falls had a 12-month economy? What if we increased the public revenue tenfold without raising taxes on ourselves? What would that mean for us locally? Would the private sector erase blight then simply by buying and restoring or replacing the decaying structures that we have today? What other issues would go away, just simply go away without even using public revenue? And then what would we be able to accomplish with more revenue and less desperate need? Would there be more meaningful employment opportunities for a local population? The answer is simply yes. Yes, all that and a whole lot more. And I know it's difficult to imagine this after decades of floundering. But it is all entirely possible. And we know in our hearts that this is true. That's why we tend to locally be so frustrated over not achieving that growth, because we know it's true, and knowing it's true and not realizing it, manifesting it physically, is frustrating. So let's get around that frustration. Let's overcome those challenges. Let's build that 12-month economy. And we do this by playing to our strengths, right? Not focusing on the weaknesses or lamenting the past and what we lost, but playing to our current strengths. It actually comes from us, from within our community initially. Now, over the past decade, I have researched our economy in great depth, very intensely. I retired 8 years ago, and I got to spend like the last year of my career focusing on my future, which was coming home to Niagara Falls. And my past career was intensely researching and developing plans to solve rather complex socioeconomic problems in other places on the planet. So it's not like I've been approaching this as a layman. It is one of my core strengths, doing this sort of work. Now, over the close to decade now that I was researching planning, my planning always hit what I'll call a hurdle of dependence. Now, what's that? What's a hurdle of dependence? Well, I call them hurdles of dependence because the plan was contingent upon unlikely outside help. Right? That's the dependence, that outside help. And it was unlikely because the help that was required would look like a poor investment to those who could offer it compared to other opportunities they might have for investment in other locations. Now, those hurdles, frankly, stem from the fact that we're only a 3-month market. All right, why am I going to invest in a 3-month market when I can invest in a 12-month market? right? The risk is lower, the reward is higher. So this creates a catch-22. I can't build a 12-month economy without outside investment. I can't get outside investment without a 12-month economy. So how to resolve that? What comes first, the chicken or the egg? That's been the challenge. And this year-long sabbatical, looking at it from a different perspective, I truly believe I found the answer. And it sounds crazy. And those of you who have been, are familiar with what I've spent the last year doing aren't going to be shocked by my answer. You're still going to find it hard to believe, probably. And a lot of others are going to be like, that is so left field, where the hell is that coming from? But the answer is birds. I said it, birds. Birds, yes, birds, B-I-R-D-S. Birds like seagulls, eagles, hawks, chickadees, osprey, ducks, did I say ducks? Canada geese, warblers, finches, birds, because we have quite a bit of untapped bird wealth. And now I'm going to start unpacking this for you, because it probably sounds crazy, but birds is the greatest. I'm not saying birds are the total answer, total solution either. I'm just saying it's the greatest, easiest, best starting point for many reasons. Now, there's many other locations around the planet that have already leveraged their bird wealth into economy fueling activities. Many of those locations also have a much smaller human population to support. And they also have higher levels of bird wealth, at least when you measure it by the number of different species. At the same time, those other locations have many disadvantages compared to Niagara Falls and Niagara County. For example, they aren't starting with a world-famous natural wonder, and they aren't starting with a base of millions of annual visitors. They aren't starting with a Ramsar site designation or an Audubon globally significant important bird area designation. And it's going to take more than one video to explain why. Then it's going to take even more videos to describe the path to the full solution. But I can't emphasize enough. What I am saying is we have to start by building on underutilized strengths. And this is one of the biggest strengths, and it's virtually ignored. Right? I mean, if you didn't know we were a globally significant important bird area or a Ramsar designated site, or don't even know what a Ramsar designated site, that's just more evidence of how ignored this is. Because those two things are huge. I hate to sound like Trump, but huge, hugely significant. And we have to understand this if we're going to understand ourselves and the opportunities we are not taking advantage of. But first, let's understand this concept of bird wealth more concretely. Bird wealth is the variety of species and the numbers of each in a given area, coupled with the means of human observation of those birds in a sustainable and ecologically responsible way. Now, hidden in that are a lot of variables. Now, while the variety of species is the more obvious of the variables, the numbers of each are very important too, and here's why. I mean, it doesn't matter if I have a wide variety of species in a location. If there's a small number of each, and it makes it very unlikely you're going to see them, and that makes it kind of unattractive to a bird tourist. But visibility and accessibility is also variable. I'll give one quick local example. I was in Joseph Davis State Park this past fall, and that's where I got my first sighting and first photographs of rusty blackbirds. There were hundreds of them in a rather densely vegetated area that only had a very narrow path, right? And that was obvious there were hundreds of them because you can hear them. I can look in the bushes and see them moving, and they were flying across the path very frequently. right? So, and I tried counting, and I literally could not count them, but certainly hundreds of rusty blackbirds. Really cool and interesting bird if you haven't seen one. I mean, go look it up on the internet. You might be surprised to find that we have a bird this interesting looking right here. But we have lots of interesting looking birds right here in our area. But, that short, narrow path with limited visibility made it very difficult for me to photograph the birds and actually enjoy watching them, because I couldn't just stand there and watch them do their thing because they were hidden by heavy foliage and shrubberies and trees and stuff, which, stands to reason that's kind of where most birds operate in an environment and a habitat like that. But most of Niagara County, like all the areas along the river and along the Niagara Gorge and down the lakeshore, provide hundreds of yards worth of visibility, and you can stand in one spot and see multiple different species, sometimes in huge numbers, like particularly on the upper river this time of year. The numbers of ducks and the variety of ducks, it helps to have binoculars for sure, or a spotting scope, but you'd be amazed. Like, you could drive down to Robert Moses, look over at the river and think there's nothing out there. Stop at the intake gates, step out to the edge, and spend a couple minutes actually looking closely, and you're going to see all the ducks just sitting on that water, feeding all winter long. If you stand on the Gorge Cliff right now and look down it between the Rainbow Bridge and the Whirlpool Bridge, you'll see little dots on the water with a pair of binoculars. You're going to see that it's flotillas of merganser ducks and flotillas of goldeneye duck and assortment, Canada geese too, and the more common mallard ducks. You'll see canvasbacks, and you're going to see the cormorants. Obviously, you're going to see the seagulls. And what you might not realize is, they're all seagulls, but they're not all seagulls. Like, at this time of year, we have 19 different species of seagulls floating around at any given moment in huge numbers. We're literally the seagull capital of the planet. And seagulls are kind of common, and maybe they're a boring bird to you. But not all of them. When you really start to study these critters, it's fascinating how different and how cool some of them actually look. And it's fun, and it's a challenge to, and it's a learning curve, but it's fun to learn about it. A year ago, and trust me, seagulls is, even in the birding community, seagulls have a rap for being the biggest challenge. Even avid birders kind of hate the seagull, but not because they're ugly or common, just because of the challenge they represent in identification. But yet, all birders still gravitate towards looking at seagulls, particularly because of some of the species that are super cool. There's a bit of a tangent and off my point, but I hope it kind of emphasized my point about how visible and accessible birds are in our area, and how that's a strength compared to, going down some wooded path with heavy foliage. So after assessing all the different factors, I've really come to the conclusion that Niagara Falls and Niagara County has an abundance, a huge abundance of untapped bird wealth. So let's have a quick glance at our documented bird wealth. And I mean a quick glance because I'm going to go more in depth on this in later videos. But eBird. eBird is the established global metric of birds. This web platform is run by Cornell Lab of Ornithology. While in many ways you could equate it to a mobile game like Pokemon, but it's honestly a crowdsourced global research effort. Talk about being ecologically responsible. Imagine Pokemon, or a trend like Pokemon, that actually fuels vitally important global ecological research. Now, when we look at New York State through the eBird lens, we see that Niagara County ranks 12th out of 62 counties, at least in terms of the number of species documented. Now our neighbor Erie County, they're ranked 11th. That begs this question: does Erie County really have a larger variety of species than we do in Niagara? I highly doubt it. It's more likely our birds are underdocumented due to less human observation. I mean, look at the data at the top here. Niagara County has far less registered eBirders, generating far less bird checklists each year compared to Erie County and the rest of the counties that rank higher than us. When you look at us in terms of number of eBirders or number of checklists in New York State, we actually rank in the bottom half, yet still ranks 12th in terms of variety of species. When I put all this in context, I actually find our ranking as 12th a rather positive indicator. And if we had more birders and documented our birds more often and understood the power of the eBird platform and played a more significant role in this research effort, you'll probably see us move into the top 10 for New York State. I mean, it's going to be hard to compete with the New York City counties. You know, it's hard to imagine that they're a great birding area, but it's going to be hard to compete for two reasons. One, they are a great birding area because you have more ecotones. Ecotones are different habitats abutting together. You know, I mean, you have two huge different ecotones in terms of saltwater habitat and freshwater habitat coming together in New York City area. It's also a major migration path at the Atlantic coast. And then, because it is so highly urbanized, the birds passing through there have to concentrate in relatively small areas. You know, there aren't that many parks for those birds to hang out in and find food as they pass through. And then you have millions of people instead of thousands of people available to observe and document the birds. So yes, it will be hard to compete with them. At the same time, who wants to stand in a crowded park with thousands of other people gawking and awing and flashing their cameras compared to here where, I mean, I just spent the last year birding, and only once, because I deliberately met other birders at a location, have I come across other birders in my journey in Niagara County. So kind of changing gears for a second, you know, and to kind of admit the obvious, yes, birding is a niche market. But what's important to understand about niche markets is the ones that are global. This is a global niche, right? The globe's huge. It's 7.2 billion people, right? So, yeah, a small percentage of the 7.2 billion people are engaged in this activity. It's also a growing activity, a growing niche. But even 0.5% of 7.2 billion people is a lot of people. It's already estimated that birding and related outdoor activity is a market worth billions of dollars and growing. And you know, a small percentage of a $49 billion market would make a huge difference to our local economy, especially at the point it is now. So how do we develop this? I mean, first we have to understand that we're already recognized as an area worthy of global focus and conservation, particularly in the area of birds. In addition to being designated by Audubon International as a globally significant important bird area, we're also a Ramsar designated site. Ramsar is a major international treaty for the conservation and sustainable use of wetlands. Now, we probably don't see ourselves as a significant wetland, but we are a significant wetland, obviously. Ramsar was a convention in the 70s, and in 1978, if memory doesn't fail me. But this thing's been, not only was it, obviously it takes a major diplomatic effort to bring a bunch of different nations together to agree on anything. But then once you do, it develops over time, right? The Paris Accords is a rather nascent international convention, right? They're still trying to work out, carbon markets and centers around carbon sequestration. They're still wrestling, all the signatories within their own countries are kind of wrestling over how to develop a carbon market, and then what does that mean, and how do we verify, and blah, blah, blah. It's complicated. And another tangent, but one that's important. It will come up in later videos. But the point there is, Ramsar is a mature treaty, all right, with a lot of resources, a lot of rules attached to it too. Achieving a designation means achieving that treaty's attention and focus and all the resources that are put behind it. And it's not easy to do, but we've done it. And then if you weren't aware of any of this, this is all like brand new news to you, despite all of this being decades old information. It just emphasizes my point about how underdeveloped, underutilized, underrecognized locally this particular niche is. And hopefully it also emphasizes how big it actually is for us. So we here in Niagara County, we have a serious responsibility to ourselves. We have a serious responsibility to future generations. We have a serious responsibility to humanity as a whole to be exceptional custodians of what is a recognized global treasure. Now, as custodians, we have to understand our role, our responsibility, and we have to adopt a culture of conservation. But honestly, it's a very rewarding thing to do. Trust me, in many, many ways, I've gone through that in the past year. I certainly didn't talk like this a year ago. I mean, I was aware of the birding stuff and always wanted to kind of get out there and do it more and see what it was all about. But I had no idea I'd love it so much. I had no idea how it would change me and change my perspective, how transformative it can be. I mean, anyone who knows me finds me to be a rather stubborn person, right? And yet, I'm telling you, I'm completely changed in so many ways. Not arguing for the past year, but just immersing myself in it. And again, maybe I have lost my mind. Maybe I am dreaming. But I doubt it, because every morning that I've woken up for the past couple of months now, I haven't even birded for the last couple of months. I have been locked into deeper and deeper research, exploring more and more topics in great depth. Like, my education as a child in photosynthesis was crap, to be a point. In college, I did study microbiology and human biology, obviously. What's the other? Organic chemistry was another area, plus chemistry. And even that didn't do justice to this particular topic. It's not difficult. But I also realized a lot of, the information and knowledge I've gained in the past couple of months, my formal education pretty much ended, and I started doing most of my postgraduate studies 20 years ago, right? And it's really in the past 20 years that we have learned a lot, and it has not been injected into the mainstream yet. It's, the scientists who are really leading on this are lamenting right now, like, it's still not in the textbooks. It's still not in the textbooks. Fortunately, we have this thing called the internet, and we can kind of circumvent textbooks. We can all learn these things. If you do have basic high school science, the understanding is not beyond your grasp. I'm off on another tangent now. I need to get back on track for this specific video. Let's just consider these tangents teasers for future videos. What the heck was I talking about? As custodians, we have to understand our responsibility. All right. And as I think I was about to say, it's very rewarding to do this, not just from a hobbyist perspective, but from a financial perspective. It could mean, and it absolutely should mean, billions of dollars injected into our economy. I mean, there's no reason for us to be ashamed of going after that either. Because as exceptional custodians, we would be providing the world immeasurable value. And that's how our species interacts. Our species rewards the members of it that provide the rest of us the greatest value. If we build on this topic and demonstrate great value to the rest of the world, it's only fitting that we'll receive the greatest reward relative to other areas that are lagging in this area, relative to other areas that are looking towards us for leadership and learning from us. Now, that means we have to learn it first, right? That's part of this transformation of our local culture that we have to go through. So, let's provide the greatest conservation value to the world, and let's get the greatest rewards for doing so. As we build on this topic here at Gorge Views, we're going to demonstrate for the audience how we can provide even more value in these other areas too, like carbon sequestration, regenerative agriculture, and lead the way in what is the inevitable global green revolution. It is coming, and for a whole host of other reasons, not just climate change and stuff like that, but the mere fact that our species is spending 10 times the amount of energy to feed ourselves than the food itself actually gives us. No species can survive that way. That is absolutely unsustainable and frankly unnecessary, as we'll explore in future videos. And imagine a wolf expending 10 calories for every calorie of food it eats. It would die. It would have no energy to hunt anymore, right? It would waste away. It wouldn't be able to dig a den. It certainly wouldn't be able to mate and raise its offspring or feed them when it can't even feed itself because it's running out of energy trying to get the energy it needs. That's what I mean by utterly unsustainable. Our species does have the great fortune of being able to convert multiple different energy sources from one form to the next, like to kinetic power of the waterfalls itself into electricity. But just because we have that capability or that ability to do such a thing doesn't mean we should do it. All right? We certainly shouldn't be doing it just to feed ourselves, right? When it is wholly unnecessary. We all can understand the money wasted in this process. We can all understand the energy waste in this process. We can all understand the added environmental changes or challenges that result from this process. And I don't think anywhere else on the planet has quite the unique opportunity to help the entire species change in the way that Niagara Falls has the opportunity to help our entire species change. So thanks for hearing me out thus far. I hope you continue with me on this conversation. I hope you weigh in on it. And I hope we see it manifest. And I'm not saying it has to manifest exactly the way I'm presenting it. I'm just trying to spark the conversation. I've been locked in my own head for a year too, right? So I'm just kind of regurgitating all this new knowledge I've acquired. And many of you probably already know many of these things I'm talking about. So especially you people with great interest and depth of knowledge on these topics and have been, more immersed and more engaged in these topics for a longer period of time, please weigh in. I mean, hopefully there's a bunch of you out there saying it's about time someone said this besides me. Well, please weigh in and show everyone else too, like, I'm just not crazy, please. Or tell me I am crazy, right? Because, the only way I'm going to find my mind is someone make me aware that I've lost it. So stay tuned. Now, in the meantime, I'm going to leave you guys with a bunch of photos and some nice music nice music. I'm going to leave you with some photos of some of the birds I photographed in the past year. And I'll tell you about these specific birds I'm about to show at the bookend of this video. All of these photos, A, were taken last year. B, all of these photos were taken within 100 meters of the Aquarium of Niagara, which, if for some reason you're not familiar with where that's located, that's downtown Niagara Falls. That's an urban environment, right? An urban environment that a century ago was all factories and railroad tracks. Just a few short years ago, there's a 4-lane highway. We've since removed that, which is a really good thing in the long run and another topic of later videos. So enjoy the photos. And if you really like them and want some, let me know. I'm happy to share them, absolutely at cost, give them to you digitally, but I would even be happier if more people went out there and got some photographs themselves. Until next time.